That's CPD Show. My name is Chris Bright, and I'll be your host for today. And today, my guest is Mark Ritchie. Mark is an international speaker, podcaster, and evangelist. He's been performing his one-man shows for the past 20 years, whether it's crowds at Edinburgh Fringe Festival or sold-out venues across the world. Mark has audiences laughing, crying, and provokes them to think. Mark lives in Nottingham with his wife Tamsin and their two kids, Jordan and Keziah. Mark, it's really great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Brilliant. No, I'm looking forward to having a chat. Yeah.
Well, yes, it's very good to have a chat with you as well. And I'm excited to talk development with you. But I think in this case, I'm as excited to talk about dessert with you because I feel like we could bond over dessert. I just have a strange feeling on this one.
Great.
Well, should we start there? What dessert have you brought with you for this wonderful dessert island that we are now on?
No, listen, it's gonna maybe people are gonna get a little bit kind of baffled by this, but it's actually ice cream and snowballs. But the ice cream has to come from a very specific place because I'm from Musselburgh, just outside Edinburgh, and it's got its own little ice cream shop that's been there for like ever. And basically people from all over Scotland come to this ice cream shop, and to get that dessert there, ice cream and snowballs, basically reminds me of my Christmases, my Easters, any kind of special event, you know what I mean?
So this is a particular, local delicacy, as it were.
So yeah, the ice cream is, so they're Italians, they're called, I'm obviously advertising for them right now. And I've got like a year's sort of kind of supply of ice cream just arriving in my freezer. But Lucas ice cream, amazing, very creamy Italian ice cream. But the snowballs, what they are is like, imagine mallow, kind of soft white mallow.
Yeah.
And then covered in chocolate, and then they're just like sprinkled with like grated coconut. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely the best thing ever.
Okay, so not just the kind of like the Cadbury's ones that you can get from the shop then, or would
No,
they do...
no, we're going very specific here. It's got to be the absolute special kind of like beautiful. There's no biscuit in these. Isn't the Cadbury ones got biscuit in them?
I don't think I've ever had a snowball, because is it a bit like a tea cake? I don't know. It's not like
it's a bit like a tea cake, but it doesn't have the biscuit in it. It just has the kind of white, soft mallow in it. It's really lovely. I feel like you don't know what mallow is, because I feel like
No, I do know what mallow is. I think my vacant expression, I'm trying to work out how you can, because normally, you go for something in a dessert that's going to be, the cold of the ice cream goes with the hot of something else, a crumble or whatever, a brownie or something. And in this case, you've gone kind of cold with sticky.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get my head around that one.
I really love that. It's like, the depths of your soul. You're just trying to figure out, God, where are you in all this? I can't see you in this dessert at all. No, yeah. I don't know what it is. I think the chocolatey against the sort of vanilla ice cream, that kind of works as a bit of a combo. It is all very kind of like sweet, though, I would say that.
So would you then have it with, is it one of those things you'd have with a cup of tea, or is it, or would that ruin it?
Oh, no. Would you wouldn't drink a hot cup of tea with ice cream, would you?
I'm not. Yeah, I possibly would.
What kind of heresy is this you come with? What is wrong with you? Hot tea and cold ice cream at the same time?
Yeah, it kind of balances it out a bit, I think.
Balance? It sounds to me like your brain is literally going, I do not know whether you are hot or cold. I will spew you out of my mouth. That is what your brain is saying. Yeah.
Well, it seems like we're going to have to probably agree to disagree on this one. Although I can't remember the last time I had a cup of tea with ice cream. So maybe I'm just making this up in my mind. I think I've had coffee with ice cream before, but that is an Italian thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
that is. Yeah.
So maybe that's okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll move on. I think that's a very interesting dessert for this desert island, and I think that would be an interesting one to give a try. Next time I'm in Musselburgh, I'll make sure I head to that the ice cream place and get myself a snowball and ice cream. So sounds good to me.
Love it.
Great. All right. Well, let's move on to talking about development. And you brought with you 3 resources that have been sort of meaningful for you over the years. So should we dive into your first one? What's your first resource that you got?
Yeah, the first one is a book that I got in America that has massively helped and influenced like my preaching. It's massively helped me as a minister and kind of formed my gospel preaching. It's a book called The Cross of Christ by John Stott. But the version that I got was an actual special edition that had got a study guide with it. And I just really found it so helpful to like really delve deep into what is the cross, what does the cross mean to us, but also these questions at the end of each chapter would really provoke me to think. And I would honestly say that his books really helped form a lot of my gospel preaching. I really find that the cross is often the point when I'm preaching where it really is asking people to make a choice. You know, I can talk about God, and I feel like a lot of people can be okay with that. And then I get to that point where I put the cross in the center point, and that really does divide the crowd, because then people really are like, are we going to follow this man, Jesus Christ? Or, you know, are we going to reject him? So for me, this book has really helped form a lot of my preaching. It also really helped me to find my passion. If you were to cut me in half, my passion is to take the cross to the most unlikely places. And I think it was this book by John Stott that really started to kind of make me realize that the cross cannot be ignored. You know, you cannot put the cross in front of people and them just be like, oh, that's lovely, that's nice. You know, you talk to people about God, and sometimes you do get that response. People are like, oh, you know, that's lovely. God up in heaven, that's amazing. But whenever you put the rugged cross, the kind of blood broken devastation of the cross in front of people, they cannot ignore it, and they really have got to make some decisions. So it really helped me to realize that I want to get the cross to the most unlikely places. The theology that John really, he looks at the cross from many different angles, and I think that was also formative in me getting to the place where I wanted to actually walk with the cross, which I did in 2012, something that I called Cross Britain. And I actually walked for 70 days, this sort of kind of length and breadth of the UK, carrying an actual cross. And I think the symbolism of the cross is so powerful to me. You know, on that mission, I asked people to write their sins on a post-it note and to put them inside the cross. And I think it was reading this book and realizing again that for many people, they need a place to take their brokenness. They need a place to take their baggage. And that helped me to understand that I wanted to give people like an actual physical, symbolic option that they could put their sin inside the cross. So it really has had a great impact on me, this book.
Wow, yeah, it certainly sounds like that, and actually, I find it really interesting because, so you know, you're an evangelist, and I think sometimes we think about the evangelist, we think about maybe the comedic side of what you do.
Sure.
Of course, that's very important, but actually having a really strong knowledge about the cross and is actually just as vital, because that's what you're calling people to, the cross. And so
Yes.
you've got to know about that as much as you know, in terms of being able to engage a crowd. They're both just as important. And I think I find that really fascinating. Is that something, how have you found that you've used that book to kind of actually put into your actual talks when you're bringing people, to draw people to the cross? Is that has it kind of shaped some of your language or anything like that?
Yeah, no, really great question. I think the thing that's been super helpful for me is that John Stott, like, he comes almost like a photographer. He takes different angles on the cross, so you see different sides to it. And what's kind of been helpful to me is, you know, the cross is so multifaceted. There's so many different things that were happening in that one moment, that it's okay in a gospel preach. You know, I'm often in a place where I've maybe got 11 minutes to unpack the gospel, or I'm in a situation where, you know, I've only got 14 minutes to kind of unpack this incredible truth. And what's been helpful to me is that, yeah, I'm only going to give in this sermon maybe one angle of the cross. And of course, there are other angles. Of course, you know, there's the whole substitutionary atonement. Well, that's one angle, but then there's the whole angle of kind of like God's wrath, and what did God have to do with that wrath? You know, there's all these different, hugely different angles that we have to like see. But I am totally at peace that sometimes I can only give one angle of it, but that's fine, because people, as they journey with God, they'll find the other angles out, you know. So I don't get worried about that. I just love the fact that there were so many things happening at Calvary. You know, there were like huge theological things happening, but there was also just the whole human element, and there was the whole sacrificial element, and it was just, you know, it's so multi-dimensional, and John Stott does an incredible job of just unpacking these layers.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many layers and angles and views to it. And I'd be interested to find out which would be your preferred go-to angle that you'd use, because I think, you know, it depends on the culture, depends on who, you know, who you're speaking to. But what would be the kind of the number one angle that you'd normally take?
I think the one for me that I love is the kind of sort of baggage drop-off point. That sort of sense of, you know, when you go to London, if you've got like a load of suitcases, there's an actual place that you can go and leave your baggage so that you can go on and enjoy everything that London's got to offer. And I think, you know, when Jesus died on the cross, it was like, I am providing a baggage drop-off point where you can leave your sin, leave the stuff that like holds you down and restricts you, so that you can go on and enjoy all this wonderful blessing of, you know, destiny and hope and joy and life, and obviously eternal life. So I really love that angle. But like you say, there's so many beautiful angles to the cross. It's wonderful.
Fantastic. Well, that's the Cross of Christ by John Stott. Should we move on to your second resource? What's your second one?
Yeah, my second one's another book. Now, I'm not fully aware of whether the author is a man of faith. I've got some indication that he is, but I'm not sure whether or not he is. But it's been such a helpful book. So it's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I think the thing for me is I love the concept of the power of tiny gains. You know, just really sort of small changes that you can make in your life that will make a huge difference. One of the quotes from it, and I mean, all of the quotes are brilliant, but one of the quotes is, "Don't worry about your current position, but worry about your trajectory." And I really love that, you know, the sort of sense in which we get really obsessed by whatever's kind of like, whatever good habit or bad habit we happen to be wrestling with. But he's actually saying, listen, look at the big picture. Where are you actually headed? And try every day just to do a tiny little gain on what you did the day before. And you know, during lockdown, I know lots of people did different things. I don't know if you were in that category. You built a house, or, you know, whatever. There's people out there that learned 5 different languages, all that stuff. But during lockdown, I tried to run, and what massively helped me was that I decided that I would every single day run a tiny bit more than I did the day before. And it was incredibly motivational for me. And I found myself running miles and miles and miles because of this little philosophy of just a tiny little bit more than the day before. So, I mean, I've read a lot of books about changing your behaviors, changing your habits, but I must say that out of all of them I've ever read, Atomic Habits is the one that's had such a big impact on me.
Yeah, I've read the book as well, and I think there's a number of things that stood out to me, and I think it works at both the individual and the corporate level.
Yeah.
So for pastors, you know, one of my favorite phrases from that book is that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Yes.
So you can have all the plans that we like, and plans are great.
Yes.
But if we don't have the systems, they'll never get done.
Yes.
And so if you want to see, you know, how, so you can put it in a personal sense. So, you know, if are you reaching to where you feel like, you know, you should be? Well, actually, let's have a look at your habits in your life, but also in a church context. Is the church going towards all that God's got for it? Well, we can have these wonderful goals and they're great and we need those, but actually what's the systems, and what are those systems in place? Because if you can change some of those systems, then actually, then actually you'll start to see that kind of change. And like you said, then you get on a trajectory because the systems start to become healthy. And that's true, I think, for in your life as well. So that was certainly one of those things I liked. Any other little jewels that you remember from the book?
Well, what Amy talks a lot about is, you know, like obviously not only getting good habits, and I've got some, I've started since I read that book. You know how like you read a great book and then you're like, well, how has it really changed your life? If somebody says to you, oh, that's a great recommendation, but how has it really changed your life? Well, I can honestly say that this one, you know, I now every single week I've got all my kind of like habits listed out, when I'm going to do them, how I'm doing them. But not only does he talk about like gaining new good habits, but he also talks about breaking bad habits. And one of the things that I really love is he says, rather than sort of massively leaning into willpower, and I think this is so interesting because as Christians and as Christian preachers, we often talk and tell people, you know, you've just got to try harder, you've just got to will harder. But he says, you know, rather than kind of like, you know, being sort of like absolutely brilliant on the willpower, why not sort your environment? Why not fix your environment to help you gain and help you to kind of actually like work better and do better? So I really love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, I think there was one of the things I really liked was it was talking about habit stacking, that you can, when you're doing one thing that you normally do, you can actually then go and add a new habit onto that. So, you know, when I go to the shop, I will do something that's, and so you can add a new healthy habit onto something you're already doing. I found that really interesting, that it's just something as simple as that you could begin to make some great changes in
exactly
in your life. Great. Well, should we move on to the final one? You've got we've had Atomic Habits, we've also had The Cross of Christ by John Stott. Should we do your final resource? What's your third one?
My third one, I really wrestled whether this was good to put in, because in a way, you know, I know everybody's very different, but this has massively helped me, and that is writing a journal. So I've written a journal every single day for the last like 34 years. And I have found this to be incredibly, incredibly helpful in my ministry, and in like trying to win people for God, and in trying to like be a good person. just writing a journal every day has been a massive help. You know, and Martin Lloyd-Jones, he said, my one concern is that my soul should be right, that my soul should be right. And I really feel that, like, when I've got my soul at full strength and in good order, then I can move forward despite everything, despite anything. If things inwardly are in good shape, then I feel that I can deal with most stuff outwardly, you know. And I think it's been hugely helpful for me to journal every day. Yeah.
So how does that look? Because it's one of those things that I've never actually started journaling, and I've heard loads of people say it's a really good idea, and so I probably should look to take it up. But I've never quite known what to write. You know, I kind of sit down and I worry it's going to be like Robinson Crusoe or something like that. You know, you know, day 3, I went to the shops, and you know, how does it actually? What when you sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, or you know, with your journal, what are the things that you write down?
So I've always been kind to myself and said, listen, this is not a competition. I'm not trying to impress anyone. So some days it's one sentence, other days it's like 3 or 4 pages. And I also am really pleased that I've managed to say to myself, it doesn't have to be the same thing. So some days I write 3 things that I'm really thankful for. Other times I'm like, oh, I'm really wrestling with this emotional issue, and I write it all down. Sometimes I put in there quotes that I found. So, you know, when I was reading Atomic Habits, my journal is just full of loads of quotes from James Clear. So I use it for lots of different things, you know, ideas. I woke up in the middle of the night the other night with a great idea. I wrote it down. You know, when you get up the next morning and you read it and you're like, that's not as great as I thought it was last night. But, you know, all these different things. So I used it for an absolute multitude of things. And you find that in certain seasons in your life, you lean a little bit more into some stuff. I went through a tough time about 10 years ago, and I look back on my journals now, and they were all full of kind of just angst, just getting stuff out, just writing it down, getting the emotions on the page. But, you know, it's super helpful to look back and be like, oh, okay, I can kind of see what God was doing through all that misery, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really real encouragement to think about how the benefit of journaling, because I think I've always thought of it as like the kind of, you know, the diaries, the famous diaries that you see in books, but it's not that. It's getting things out on the page that probably need to be out of your head and onto a page. Like you said, waking up in the middle of the night with a great idea, however great that idea actually ends up being, is less important than actually just sort of getting the idea out of your head and onto the page. And I think there's a good thing. And that actually leads me on to a question I've got around that is, when's the best time for you to journal? When do you normally do that? Is it a morning thing, evening, obviously potentially in the middle of the night as well?
Yeah.
But when's your normal journaling time?
Well, I always have my journal with me, so I really do shuffle that around as well. So I do sort of kind of often first thing in the morning, but I'm not against. I just think that that's what kills people with their journal. I've heard sort of people say to me, "Oh, I did it for a few years, but I gave up on it." And I say, "Well, why did you give up?" And they said, "Well, it just, you know, it just gets so ritualistic, and you just do it the same." And I'm like, yeah, but that's the problem. You see, I've not got any kind of strong, I've got to do it first thing in the morning. I'll do it whenever. So, you know, most days, yeah, anytime. Sometimes I get in from work and I'll just scribble a few things down, or early morning or last thing at night. I've got no format on that. And I've got no format on what I need to write. Because you see, I think some people set themselves these standards that are like, flipping heck, you know, if you're trying to write 5 pages every day, guess what? You're only going to do that for a few months. But if you can swap it and change it, And, you know, some days I look back and it's genuinely just 3 words. And then other days I look back and think, wow, you know, I must have been on it that day, you know, and it's a lot. So it's really been helpful to write things down about your emotions. Like I remember the first time I did a massive youth preach and lots of people came to the front. And I had this weird emotion the next morning of feeling a bit down. And what was brilliant is a few months later, I recorded the same thing. And then I was like, oh, I can see a pattern that after big preaches, the next morning I feel a bit low. And it was helpful because then I was like, now I know how to tackle this. I can understand that there's a bit of a pattern developing here. So it's been hugely helpful in me getting my soul to a good place and in good order.
Yeah, wow, that's a great idea. And I think for any minister listening to this, I think the care of your soul is, absolutely vital. So something like journaling can do that. And is journaling a good place for you? And one of the things you're known for is the great stories that you have. And is journaling the place where those stories kind of get clarified, and the things that you see in the day that we miss? I was talking to someone and someone says, Mark sees the same stuff we all see, but Mark just remembers it. Does journaling help you do that?
Yeah, no, exactly. That is brilliant because I think there's so many people say to me, oh, why does all this funny stuff happen to you? And I says, no, everything's happening to everyone, but you've just got to make a note of it. You've got to write it down, make sure you don't forget it. And so my journal is always close by, and then I can skim through some stuff, and I think, oh, how can I make that funny? How can I put that in my next sermon? And like people see things every day that they could use in their sermons, but they forget to write it down, and then it just gets lost. Whereas I always have that notebook ready, and just and at different times I used to, when I was poor, at the very beginning of my ministry, I had rubbish kind of like naff journals that were just like, cheap. But now, I put a little bit more money into it because I want nice journals. And so I've got a real stack at home. And I just hope that if I die, I think I will die. When I die, not if I die. When I die, I just hope when my kids are looking through them, they're not going to be like, what? Why did he say that?
Yes, I think there's always that thing of writing something, and especially if you're getting some emotion out on the page, it's a very it'd be a personal thing. I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so the last question I got on journaling is, physical journal, e-journal. Can you use? Is tech a good idea, or do you prefer the pen and the paper?
Well, personally, I'm a bit of a pen and paper guy, but no, listen, if people feel like they can do it. The thing that I love about the paper is that I can go up, I did this a few months ago, got some discouraging news. I went up to my study and I just flicked through a few of my journals and just saw and remembered the most encouraging things. And it really did my soul good. And so that's why I love it on the paper, is because I can then flick, and it's a nice experience. But I do know that many people love the old tech. So, if you want to put it on your phone or whatever, you've got, the latest app I think they've got apps for journals. So, of course, whatever works for you. But for me, it's a nice feeling to sit down with a cup of tea and just flick through some old books and just read some good stuff.
Yeah, and maybe some ice cream and snowballs as well at the same time.
No hot drink with the ice cream. I thought we'd sorted that.
I thought I could try and get it in there, but no. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to to share those resources and also to share your favorite dessert. I'm going to have to go to Musselburgh and try some Italian ice cream and Snowballs now. So next time I'm up that end of the country, I will make sure I do that. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure I'll catch you again very soon.
Brilliant. Bless you, sir.
Thank you for listening to this episode of That CPD Show. For more episodes, why not subscribe and give us a review? It really helps us out. See you next time.